We're going to spend the day doing our Bucks Island Live on the water with our resident pro, Tracy Robinson. Tracy?
Hello, Tracy.
I think they got that. Anyway, we canceled it because of the rain. Didn't want to ruin the cameras.
Not just because of the rain, the 40-mile-an-hour gusts, the threat of some lightning, I think that also contributed. But
I wasn't worried about the lightning. You were going to be the one holding the umbrella. I wasn't worried about the lightning.
See how we roll around here? Yeah, well.
So we punted. And what we're going to do is Tracy is knowledgeable in all things Alabama fishing, knowledgeable in all things fishing. We thought we'd come together and do some sort of a Q&A.
Yep.
We can.
We got a bunch of stuff that I
Shea
think.
Penny says you won't sink, you'll float.
I think Tracy is. He was ready to talk about some of the stuff. I even got a few photos of some of the stuff he was going to catch today, and. That's some of these fish or stuff you've been getting pre-fishing for us.
Yeah, we've got an ABT tournament coming up at Weiss Lake, maybe next week from Saturday, week from tomorrow. Yeah. So I was already practicing up there a little bit, and then you guys asked to do a little on the water footage up there, so I spent a little extra time up there this week, and they're really biting up there. I had 2 really good practice days up there, and I was kind of excited about today, but I was also a little optimistic because of the cold water, cold weather that came in. So wasn't sure what it would do to the bite and then the storms. But this week up there, those post-spawn fish were pretty aggressive, and it wasn't really hard to catch them up there this week.
That's what, a 2-pounder?
Yeah, it's
one and a half.
A little trick photography there turned that into about a 3-pound fish.
Okay, so Kenneth Sanders has our first actual question for Tracy. Right. What would be good to use on Logan Martin this time of the year?
Logan Martin this time of the year. I was actually on Logan Martin one day this week. So right now, Neely Henry, Logan Martin, and Weiss are pretty close to the same right now as far as what pattern the fish are on. Logan Martin's been a little bit hotter for the past few months as far as a fishing lake than Weiss and Neely Henry. But Logan Martin, post-spawn fish right now. There's not much grass down there, so you're kind of having to stick with wood, rock, secondary points and stuff. But anything kind of right outside of their spawning areas would be the ideal places to target. Probably Cincos, square bill, crankbaits, spinnerbaits, hitting those areas that are just outside the spawning pockets.
How deep?
I would say 2 to 4 feet. Some of those fish that Logan Martin is covered with spots, some of those are still out there deep. So I know you can still get bit out a little deeper in that 15-foot range on some of those spots, but predominantly your better quality fish, especially the largemouth, are up there shallower. Probably targeting those largemouths would be your best bet for tournament fishing right now.
But just to go fishing, you want to catch spotted bass?
Cinco is probably the best thing in that 2 to 4 foot water right now. Wacky rig or Texas rig. You can catch them on both. I prefer the wacky rig, but just going down those hard banks that those fish have just recently spawned on, you can get bit quite a bit there.
Okay, so we have another question from David Finerty. What's your go-to strategy for post-spawn fish?
My go-to strategy is probably a little bit more the grass bite. I like, or the corner post of a pier. Those fish have just spawned. They spend a lot of time, a week or so up in the shallow flats. They're beat up. They're abused from that process. What I've found is as soon as they come off bed, which I think that's where they are right now on these 3 lakes around here, they'll look for that first corner post on a pier, or they'll get up under those walkways. They'll get in the first grass patch. So I just try to find that first piece of cover right away from where I know that those fish have spawned.
And what kind of techniques do you like?
I'm back and forth a little bit between the swim jig and the Cinco. If they're aggressive enough, I'll throw the swim jig a lot around those pieces of wood and the grass. But if it gets tough, I'll back off and go slow down and use that wacky rig Cinco.
And there seems to be some woman on here winking at you.
Oh, no.
Some Lisa Bishop Robinson. She's winking at you over here.
I recognize that one.
Yeah.
That's my number one.
Actually,
fan.
mine's watching too. I couldn't believe Christina's sitting there watching too. Love seeing the wives get on here and support their men.
Yeah. Well, that's my biggest fan. Lisa follows me all over the country. So
we need support is the problem.
Well, So what's your rod and reel setup when you're fishing Senko?
Senko, I throw mine on bait caster. It's probably a weakness of mine, but I just really never could really get into the spinning rod game. I've tried it and I've used it, but and when I see people throwing the Senko a lot, I probably see a lot more of the professionals using that's spinning rod setup. But for me, I'll use a medium heavy rod with a 7.3 is probably a go-to for me on most of my ratios. But that's the setup I use on my rod and reel combo is a bait caster with a 7.3 medium heavy. And using the different styles of wacky rigs.
What Senko's plenty heavy to throw on a casting rod. The thing about if you get in ultra clear water where you're going to be wacky rigging a Senko, it's and you're going to use light line in super clear water. Casting reels don't work well with line lower than 8-pound test. They don't. You get into that real thin braided line, probably below 30 pound, and you start getting the line will go into the sides of the spools because the tolerances, there's enough slop in there for the thing to turn.
Yeah. Okay.
So you'll have with thin line, you'll get that start to cut into the line itself, and then you'll have where it gets stuck in the spool, and you can't have that when you're fighting a fish. So that's when to use spinning on a Senko is the line. I do. So obviously coming from the West, I use spinning rods a lot, and I do it by line size.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I do it by line size. If I'm going to be basically 10-pound line or up, it's casting, unless the bait is really small and I need to throw it on spinning.
Okay.
But then below 10 pound is going to be on spinning.
So what line do you normally use with Senko?
I use Seagar InvizX line and 10 to 12 pound, depending on watercolor. But on the Coosa River, it's such dirty water. You can get away with a little bit bigger line on that. Logan Martin may be a little different at times, but Neely, Henry, and Weiss, you can get away with a little bit heavier line.
Huh. All right.
Guy named Fred Reese wants to know what you like to do in the Honeycomb area at Guntersville.
The Honeycomb area at Guntersville, that area is not a lot of contours in Honeycomb. There's only a couple of good, points from the bridge out to the main entrance into Honeycomb. It's almost like a big bowl. There's 2 good points over, near the launch area there. And, going there, I kind of look at those 2 points, the first places I stop when I go into Honeycomb. And I'll look for, at some deeper, like crankbait, swim bait type of stuff on those, better points there. And as I move out towards the river in Honeycomb, there's some pretty good banks that have good depth on them. Spinnerbait and topwater around those banks is pretty good, at certain times of the year. Way on back in Honeycomb, there gets to be a lot of grass, and I'll throw a lot of topwater. There'll be frog later on, buzz baits, and jerkbait type stuff on top.
And we forgot to mention on this, his sponsor, Producer Swimbaits, which is a company we're looking at bringing into the shop here anyway. But they're going to be giving away, what was it?
3 packs of 2.
Three 2-packs of Producer Swimbaits to people who comment and share this Q&A. It was going to be comment and share on the water. But for anybody that enters by commenting, we're going to do a random draw later for those Producer Swimbaits. So throw your questions out here. Obviously, we can find stuff to keep, dazzling you with our knowledge or baffling you with our BS, whichever one comes first. In the interim, but certainly comment to win those baits. Talk about you obviously had a massive day at Guntersville earlier this year and winning the first ABT of the year. Talk about what it was like to pull together a 30-pound bag in a tournament where you got 10 grand on the line.
Well, it happened really quick, in that tournament, and I had spent a lot of time at Guntersville leading up to that tournament, so I felt pretty confident on having a respectable bag. But right before the tournament, like two days before, the weather just made a big shift up there. The water's flooded, it muddied, and I practiced and really had terrible practice on that Thursday and Friday. I think on Friday I only got 1 bite, actually. But I still had not gone back to where I felt a little bit comfortable with catching them in those 2 practice days. I didn't want to go there and not catch them and ruin my mindset, so I just assumed that they were still going to be there. Rolled into the best spot, of the places I had on that morning, and in the first 30 minutes, I had caught 2 8-pounders. My partner caught 1, and I caught 1. So that really kicked our day off good and took a lot of pressure off of us. I wanted to do good at Guntersville. My partner and I both fish up there a lot, and we're expected to do good. So it kind of hurts when you go up there and don't do good. And I didn't want to have that situation. I guess I labeled Guntersville my home lake, even though I live here on Neely Henry and Gadsden. But I spend majority of my time at Guntersville. So having those two giants in the bag right off the bat, it took a load off of me. I was able to really settle down then and just fish because.
And then you just caught little ones after that.
Well, after that we did. I mean, we kept on.
30-pound bag or nothing.
We actually we had 22 pounds in the first hour and a half, I guess. So throughout the day, we felt good, but we knew that kind of weight wouldn't win. But we were able to cull up again on another 5.5 pounder, and then late in the day caught another 5.5. So. Really bumped our bag up, culling twice throughout the day, but we never once really honestly felt like we were going to win that tournament until we caught that last 5-pounder. And even then with 30 pounds in the live well,
yeah, you never know.
I told him, I said, we probably needed 32. So that's just Guntersville.
All right. We got some more questions. Let's see. Logan Steele, was Tracy afraid to get wet this morning? No, I made the call to not ruin camera equipment. Not Tracy, not Michael. Although Michael was a little nervous about having to hold an umbrella in the lightning potentials.
Hey, once you get hit by a fish, lightning.
Yeah, I think they're a little different. Mark McCaig said he's watching, and like I said, he said he had extra special questions for you. Okay, David Finerty again. Do you invest a lot in color and size of the bait, or do you keep it simple and fish one thing most all the time?
I'm very stuck on one particular color on a bait. I will branch out from those colors a little bit. But
so you're suggesting they buy every color in the store? Correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
just kidding.
I've got colors, for jigs. I pretty much green pumpkin, black and blue. I stick with that, and then got dirty jigs.
Grab some of the stuff that I think he was planning on using this morning.
Here's a dirty jigs. This is Canterbury's flipping jig and Magic Craw, swirl. There's some baby pocket craws. Oh, there's his Senko that he was discussing earlier. Is that the color?
Yeah, that's the color. I try to stay with a base color of green pumpkin in most of my plastics and my jigs. And, if water gets really dirty, I'll use the, blue, black and blues a little bit more on the jigs. And then I'm pretty much a white swim jig guy. I hear these pros and I know they know what they're talking about. Well, today I'm having to use this color brown or this color black or a little bit of flake in there, but the white works for me and that's what I throw. So if I'm throwing any color than that, something's probably not going right for me. And then swim baits, natural colors. I use the shad colored swim baits, and that's my go-to lure at Guntersville. I get a lot of Guntersville questions. So they asked me my bait up there. It's just a big 6.5-inch shad colored producer swim bait.
That's not big.
Well, that's not big for you California guys, but Dan, the West Coast guy, that 6.5 is not big for them. But for around here, the 6.5 is about as big as I go at Guntersville. But I just go with the base shad color. Blue Gizzard is the producer color that I use up there. And whoever wins these, free swim baits from Producer Swim Baits, he said that you guys can go on there and actually custom. You get the size you want, anywhere from 3 inch all the way up to the 6.5 that he's got in any color you want. So he'll let you customize those, and Dano will arrange that after we get through today.
Yep. Okay, we've got Elijah Wooten asked, what's your opinion of Weiss Lake?
Weiss Lake is a really good lake, and at times it can be my favorite lake. I grew up on Weiss Lake. Back in the 70s, Weiss was probably considered the best bass lake anywhere around North Alabama. Eufaula and Weiss were two of the better known lakes at the time. In the 70s, I fished, I started fishing around 77, 78 with my father in tournaments, but late 70s, early 80s, we would go to Weiss, and it was 25, 30-pound stringers were consistent. But back then there was 7 and 10 fish limit. So it's a little bit different, fish volume back then, but great fishery. It took a big decline, but I've seen it over the past few years really picking back up on the lake. I'm not seeing as many, I'm not blaming it on the stripers, but I'm not seeing as many of the big stripers in the lake either anymore. The bass fishing has really turned into a pretty successful lake. Just this week, I caught 9 fish, 5 pounds or better just in 2 days of fishing. So if that's any indication of, what the lake can do right now.
Brandon Matthews asks, how do you break down a lake when you're trying to prepare for a tournament?
Well, time on the water is the key to anything. And I don't really travel the country fishing tournaments. So I pretty much stick to Alabama, a little Georgia, Tennessee. Mississippi some, but I've got a little bit of history on most of those. So for me, I would go into these tournaments on these lakes and have a little bit of idea where the fish should be. Like right now, going to any of these lakes, you have to know around here that spawn, they're either in the spawn, just finished the spawn, or about to spawn. That's kind of the situation on any of these lakes, probably within 2 hours of here right now. So as soon as I go there, I'm at least heading towards the shallow waters, looking for where the spawning fish would be. Go in and see if you see fish visually, then back out a little bit to that first little cut or first little area, and then maybe even backing out into the deeper stuff right out in front of it. So it all depends on the time of the year, but understanding that fish behavior, they go through that spawn right now, they go through survival, or really eating up the bait fish over the next few weeks, and then into July when it gets hot around here, they're in survival mode. They're just kind of hunkered down somewhere in a shadow, in a deep place, in a hole, and then in the fall chasing those shad. So that question is hard to answer, unless I went through all of those, pieces of the year, but just time on the water and having a foundation of where to start is the key to me.
So how often do you get out of the area and fish some other?
I fish.
I'm sure Honda keeps you pretty busy.
Yeah, I work with Honda. We've got a really busy operation there with about 7,000 employees, so it requires a lot of my time to be there. So I try to stay within about 2 hours of here. I do get out some. I fished, Old Hickory Lake, won a tournament there 2 years ago, pretty big tournament, a little bit at down at Seminole. So most of the times when I travel out of the state, it's usually because of a championship or something that requires me. I try to stay within about 2 hour home base of here.
I got news for you. If you put the time in, we'd be watching you on the Bassmaster Classic stage. I know how good you are. What do you think? This is Brandon Johnson asked, what do you think the cold front will do to the shad spawn?
Well, yesterday I fished some of the better areas and seawalls that had shad spawn going on. I'm speaking Weiss only right now, but at Weiss. So the shad spawn was just barely even getting started for what I saw yesterday. I watched Canterbury and some guys fish up there on TV a week or so ago, and they'd mentioned a little bit of it too. But yesterday I only saw just a handful of places where the shad spawn was going on. So I would have to assume that it's probably going to back that out a little bit with these 30-degree nights that we've got.
Okay, we got a guy named Mark McKegg who asked, what do you think Weiss will be one? How do you think Weiss will be one next week? And I'm just going to say anything you're not doing, Mark. Just kidding. He's every bit as good as you are.
Weiss next week.
And you don't really have to answer that. He's jacking.
I know Mark's tortured me right now by putting me on the spot because he's fishing that tournament too. But next week, it's not a secret.
Pause. Don't listen to this next bid. Go ahead and tell him what's going to win.
Plead the fifth.
Yeah. Anyway, but what will happen at Weiss, in my opinion, though, next week is these fish are coming off bed. They're just like I said, they're going to the first piece of cover. So, there's some great fishermen, that are fishing this tournament, that every year, no matter what, they come in with 20 pounds plus. So I'm going to go with about 23 pounds is going to win it. And it's going to be probably on wood, corner of a dock, a stump, or a log. Those guys that know. One day I was up there, and I'm not going to call his name, but he's probably one of the best fishermen at Weiss Lake. And I was fishing up through there, and on top of his big bass boat, he's got these big giant cedar trees and blocks and all, and he's putting out brush out in that 4 to 6 foot of water. So he knows that not just for this tournament, but over the next few months, he'll go to that and he'll fish that stuff and he'll win tournaments. But those guys that put that kind of effort and time into it are the same ones that I see on the stage, every tournament up there.
Mike Godfrey replied to Mark McKegg and said, having the most weight, that's what's going to win. Dan Wendy Baker, what's your favorite go-to lure when times get tough on the Delta? Or on the Coosa. Sorry, I went back home in my head.
Wow.
Tough on the Coosa.
What is your go-to? Like, things are tough and you're just, you can.
We've talked about that already. The Cinco, to me, that I can catch them on that about any time. I can get bit on that. One of the guys that asked questions a while ago, he carried me out and we just grabbed a straight worm. We'd not been on the lake. You just start going down the bank. For some reason, they'll hit that Cinco all the time. That's my go-to.
That is proof that bass are stupid.
It's a stick.
They must eat twigs.
Yeah.
They must eat twigs. Fisher Bridges, I think that's a fake name.
Yeah.
Because has your approach to fishing Guntersville changed with the influx of eelgrass and the loss of the hydrilla?
I could go on and on about Guntersville, but 7 years ago, I wasn't even really competitive at Guntersville. Now I can at least be competitive up there at times. But about the time that I decided I was going to quit getting beat all the time at Guntersville about 7 years ago, I took a year and I told my co-angler, my partner, my team partner, I said, I'm going to spend next year doing nothing but fishing Guntersville from January to December. I did that. And about the time that I was doing that is about when the eelgrass really started coming on at Guntersville. So I was really able to understand that. But eelgrass, and there's even some new ones out there. I forget some of the names of the newer grasses that we saw this past year or two, but the eelgrass did make a huge impact on it. And it's a lot different from the hydrilla and the milfoil. That hydrilla and milfoil kind of grows all the way up to the top, and it's just long strands basically. But that eelgrass is kind of like a monkey grass in your yard, and it creates eddies and allows fish to stay there, a lot longer than they do on that or the hydrilla and milfoil that dies off. I've been able to catch them in the eelgrass from January to December. So I think eelgrass is one of the key points at Guntersville.
Okay, and you've got a guy named Willie Staten asked, can he go fishing with you someday? And then apparently you have a nickname that I hadn't heard before, because Robin Howell and Dalton Robinson both asked, is that Tater? Is that a nickname I need to know something about?
Yeah, since Randy and Robin called me out on my nickname from many years ago, I'll go ahead and tell you this quick story. It was a long time ago, I'd say 25, 30 years ago, maybe even, and Randy and Robin were just really getting big into fishing. And at the time, sorry, Randy, but Robin was a bigger name in fishing than Randy was.
She might still be.
Robin was on the women's bass trail, which they don't have that as much now.
Bass and Gals.
But Robin was one of the top ladies, women on that trail, and they came to Neely Henry. I spent a couple of days out on the boat fishing with Robin, and then me and Randy fished during the tournament while they were having the Bass and Gals tournament. But we met many years ago through that. But
there's
thanks
some of the
for bringing up the
ones out
nickname.
there. You didn't tell us how you got the nickname.
Probably that pretty bald head right there.
Shane Robinson wants to know, is it true you got your fishing skills from your brother?
There may be something to that, but both of us, our dad was a big fisherman, so we grew up with my dad.
I got something to go back to Guntersville and the eelgrass. Now, maybe a little bit of a long lead in, which I don't like to do, but several years ago, the pre-spawn bite on the California Delta was a swim bait or a wake bait. And guys went through this period of time where you'd see team tournament weights at the Delta. It'd be 38 to 42 pounds for a team tournament to win. And it would take 27, 28 to get a check. And then around about 2015, you'd still see like a 28 to 30 pound bag to win, but then a check would be 15 pounds. And people started saying, man, something's wrong. They sprayed it. They killed the grass. They blah, blah, blah. And, I listened to it all. And then fast forward to, it was 2000. So this goes back to 2010, I believe, when the elites came out. That's about when it happened. And the elites came out to California and the weights were off. And Skeet came in to the service yard, and I was there after the weigh-in was over, and he was getting something done on his boat, and he was furious because he'd weighed in 15 pounds. He's like, man, I killed myself. I said, really? You did? And he goes, yeah, 15 pounds. I said, have you checked the standings? And he was in 11th. And around about that time, what I started noticing is that's when the punch bite on the California Delta started getting big. And all of a sudden the weights jacked back up again. Okay, so fast forward that. To me, that meant the fish moved from the pressure that they'd been feeling. So Guntersville has been a hydrilla, grass beds, blah, blah, blah bite. And I see a lot of people on Facebook saying the same things. They say, Guntersville's got to be dead. The fish we killed them, the Alabama rig, the spraying, the whatever other questions, too much pressure. And then we see a lake go where, Darian and his buddy win a tournament, 32 pounds. Then you see you come out in 30 pounds, and you see all of these big weights being produced. The lakes aren't dead. The fish just moved to something new to get away from the pressure. Am I right? I
agree with that. And, I think two things that have contributed to that is the different grasses that was mentioned earlier. The introduction of eelgrass, the naiad, and all have changed a little bit about what the fish prefer, but also the pressure. I can go to some of those places that, 20 years ago you could go to, and it was automatic. You could go out there and you were going to catch them. But now every time you ride by it, There's boats sitting on it. They're picking off every fish, and the fish don't have an opportunity to really school up on those places, in that May, June time when you'd normally catch them out there. So electronics to me is probably the number one factor, even above the new grasses and whatnot, where now, you can take just a novice fisherman, and if he's got his units dialed in right, he can just cruise right out through there, and he can see, there's a hump, there's a point, and he can just go fish all of them. And electronics has almost eliminated those better offshore places that fish, especially at Guntersville, congregated years ago.
But when you see a guy who says, man, I'm just not catching them, the fish must be gone. I've gone to my waypoints that I've always caught them on, and they're not there. That's the fisherman getting locked into something that the fish don't do, correct?
That's right. I've been guilty of that too, because I'm sure everybody has. But a couple of years ago, I was fishing with Matt Lee. It was 2 years ago, and I was telling him, I was really catching them here, I was really catching them there, and I just can't get bit there. And I keep going there, and he said, "Man, quit chasing those ghosts." So that, every time now I get in that rut where I start thinking about, I'm going to go here, because I caught them there in the past. I think about what Matt told me about, don't chase those ghosts. So,
to when the elites were back, 2015, the event Skeet won. Anybody that had significant Guntersville experience, they didn't fare well, because they put in their mind time of the year they're going to be offshore, and those guys chased that. Yeah. But the guys that ended up doing well, the Iconelli, the Skeet, the Byron, those guys that did well, they were in the shallows because the fish hadn't quite gone all the way through their process yet. And so I talk to people about staying current, looking at what's happening, and I just think that that's kind of more along the lines of what goes on. Somebody says, Lisa gave us, she used to call you sweet potato. Okay. Asked Tracy about fishing Jeff Cook June Jam tournament at the age of 15. He was killing it back then. That's Shane Smith.
Jeez, 15. I did fish it, and I do remember it.
That was 7-8 years ago. Is that?
He's got kids older.
I'm 50 plus now, so that would have been 35 years ago. But yeah, man, we had a good time fishing those. Alabama, Jeff Cook used to have a tournament every year, and that was always our favorite tournament back in the early 80s, 70s, and we did really well in a couple of those. But that was our most look forward to tournament every year.
Well,
you got any questions? Come on.
Well, so you talked about electronics. And I'm a bit of a tech geek, the guy sitting here running all this social media and websites and all that kind of stuff. So electronics is definitely kind of fascinating to me. What's your setup that you've got on your FXR?
Right now I'm running Humminbirds, and I do have Garmin on there as well. So I've got the Humminbird Helix. I've got 12.
Let me guess, Panoptix Live.
I've got Panoptix Live. I don't even use the sonar down image on the Garmin.
Okay.
I've got it mounted at the front, and it's exclusive, just Panoptix viewing.
Okay.
I do have the new perspective view mount that I've put on this past week and been playing around with it a little bit.
The what?
The live
another
scope
feature in
the they added another
They
feature.
basically turn the transmission sideways.
Instead of here where you're looking at a cone of a water column, they turned it here, so now you're looking at a flatter surface. You can't really see in perspective as much for how deep the fish are in this view, but I can really see a wider view of the fish swimming around and the stump and the rock and the bait fish.
I think we've done a few, starting to see more and more guys asking for that dedicated Garmin on the bow. And we've done a couple builds on some of the skiers. Pretty cool stuff. So you're liking it.
I like it.
You're a believer.
I won't say
that
I won't say that it's a game changer, but at the same time, it does let you know. It does let you know that you're in an area that there's even fish activity, and that's what I saw. Fishing Neely Henry last week. I would get out there on a place, on a point or whatever, and I'd be casting, but I could just look down at my screen. If there was no fish on there, I'm really wasting my cast. So I could pack up really quick and head to something else. So. I couldn't, and I pull up to the next one. I see 10 fish here, 3 here, 4 here. I still don't know if those are bass, but I at least know there's some fish activity on that place. So it gives me a little bit of an advantage from that perspective.
So how much time, we talked about, obviously you're super familiar with a lot of the water around here. We had that question earlier about if you're fishing a new spot. But so how much time are you spending doing the side imaging, trolling around, when you're doing your pre-fishing, even though you're fairly familiar with the areas.
Yeah. The side imaging, to me, it doesn't come into play as much on Weiss and Neely because it's mostly a shallower bite.
Okay.
There's times at Weiss where I'll get out there wide and I may spend a half a day out there scanning, but Guntersville being more of a lake type feature as opposed to a river, I'll spend 80-90% of my day sometimes just sitting there scanning on the side imaging and down imaging, and not even try to catch a fish.
That's just in practice, right?
Just practice, yeah.
How much time will you spend? How much time will you spend in a tournament on a ledge lake like that? Actual scanning before you make a cast? Because I've heard guys say spend 3/4 of their day doing it. Is that accurate?
In a tournament?
Yeah, during the tournament day.
No, I don't do much scanning during the tournament day. There's probably been times where I would pull up to a spot and I already, if I'm fishing in a tournament, I already have a reason why I'm there. So I think there's fish there, and there's fish there. So I'll fish it before I'm going to run over it. And if I fish it and I'm satisfied mentally that there's no fish there, I'll scan over it to get a visual to validate that there's no fish there or they just weren't biting.
Yep. Mike Godfrey wants to know, what size fluorocarbon do you use for jigs?
For jigs.
And give him your offshore and then maybe your flipping, because he doesn't. Although I'm assuming he's talking flipping.
Yeah, on flipping jigs, I stay with about a 17, anywhere from 15 to 20, but I fish with Willie Staten a good bit, and he and I have had this conversation many times. We've tried to go down a little bit on line size, but, flipping, pitching the brush or trees or lay downs on Neely and Weiss, I'll use 20. Under the docks, I'll try to go down to 15 at times as the water clears up, but if I can get away with it, I'll jump up to that 17. On the swim jigs, I use 20-pound fluoro or 50-pound braid, depending on watercolor. I like the braid, and I will try to use it all the time if possible. But sometimes that water in the grass will get to a clarity that I think the braid is a little bit visible to the fish. I may be way off on that. That's just a gut feeling, and I'll switch to the 20-pound fluoro if so.
Do you fish a leader at all on your braid, or
no leader.
Just straight braid, huh? Okay.
There came when braid first came out. A lot of people may not know the name Bobby Barrick, but he's kind of the guy that put frog fishing on the map. Even with the guys that ended up making it, like Dean Rojas, Bobby Barrick was in Stank Proof Bobby's Perfect Frog. That's Bobby Barrick, and he's the one that exposed it to the rest of the guys that ended up taking it nationally that made names for themselves. And when braid came out, it was a hashtag game changer. But then he started going, I don't think I'm getting as many bites. So he changed back to mono. And what he found, and then unfortunately I found, the biggest frog bite I've ever gotten, I lost because I was trying to set the hook on mono. And doesn't matter how many bites you get on some things, if you can't get the hook in them, it doesn't matter if you get more bites if you can't drive the hook.
Gotcha.
So there's times where braid, it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
I might say one more thing about that on braid versus fluoro too, Mike. Another key factor into that is on my jig. There's a jig hook for fluoro and there's a jig hook for braid. Yes. And I talked to so many people that don't realize that. They talk about, my jig hook flexed or it bent. When I set the hook,
not a braid.
You have to find a jig that has a hook that is satisfied for a braided line. If you throw that other on the braid, you're going to flex those hooks and you're not going to get the hook set that you need, and you're going to have to be bending your hook.
So that's the no jack from.
Yes. So Dirty Jigs makes a no jack swim jig, and they make a no jack flipping jig. And in Strike King, it's the Hack Attack heavy cover flipping jig, and then they have a Hack Attack fluorocarbon jig, and that's because, and honestly, that it's a tuna hook. It literally is a tuna hook. The hook that they put in the no jack jig and the hook that they put in the Hack Attack flipping jigs, the heavy cover jigs, it literally is a tuna hook built for saltwater. That I think that's the hook is such a large diameter that what they were finding is when they were flipping braid, they were bending the hooks out, so they wanted something that wasn't. But if you go down to fluorocarbon on that hook, there's a chance you may not penetrate because you do have 16% line stretch and fluorocarbon still. So if your hook diameter is so large that you stretch the hook more than penetrate, you have to balance the equipment. Let's see. McCaig, do you have to see fish on your electronics to fish offshore on the Coosa?
Do you have to see fish on your electronics to fish offshore on the Coosa? Any lake, I guess, on the Coosa?
Yeah.
Logan Martin's probably the lake that I fish the most as far as using my electronics. It's probably my least fished lake, but the one I use electronics on the Coosa would be Logan. And yes, I scan before I fish it during practice on Logan, and I wouldn't fish any of the points and ledges down there, without seeing fish on them first. And Neely's is pretty good on the lower end for deep fish as well. So I'll get down there and scan on the lower end too to try to get on some of those winding patterns on those deep, Neely Henry fish on the lower end.
Mike Carter wants to know what kind of desserts you take on the boat during a tournament. Mike.
Well, being a borderline diabetic, I had to watch that. But there's what he's referring to is there's a restaurant over in Cedar Bluff. I think they're in the middle of, not even open at this point. But she packed us some really special homemade pies for that ABT event. And now that's kind of the joke is we're going to have that every event because we won that one after eating the homemade pies.
Shane Smith asks, what's your favorite crankbait in late summer on river channels at Weiss?
River channels at Weiss. Growing up, I threw a lot of DB3s and Rebel Maxi Rs and Mini Rs. That was my, all-time favorite. And I would just sit out there on the river, and that was my perfect days. I could just get out there and just throw a Maxi R all day long or a DB3. But now some of these newer crankbaits, some of these KVD, the DTs and such crankbaits, they're so easy to retrieve now compared to those older, balsa plugs that we used to use, and those Maxi Rs. It's so much less effort. I've kind of transitioned over those. So I would say probably a DT6 to a DT10, and something like that size. 5XD, 5XD, 6XD. And Guntersville will even go up to, the 8 and 10, later in the year when they school up.
The funny thing, obviously, I get to spend a fair amount of time around a lot of the Strike King team guys, and the bait that they still use a ton is the original Series 5. A lot of those guys love that Series 5 crankbait, which is, it's not the extra deep version of it. It gives you that, 10 to 12 range, but for some reason, those guys really love that Series 5. Let's see. LaCrisha Clark asks, what's your go-to bait for Coosa in May?
In May, right now, if these fish are just coming off bed, and we talked about that a little bit earlier in the discussion, but, and they're a little bit sluggish, for the 1st of May. But my favorite thing in May, whenever they kind of get through that recovery process, would be topwater. I love, the Zara spooks, the chug bugs, even some of the hollow belly frogs. That's, I maybe not would call it my go-to bait, but that's my favorite way to catch them in mid to late May is on the topwater.
Stephen Turner asks, what adjustments do you make when a cold front comes through? And let's just take Neely Henry for that for right now, since that's where we're at. Unless, Stephen, if you got another lake you want them to address while we're talking.
Yeah, on the cold front, it's a little bit just a common sense approach. I think you have to just slow down whenever the cold front hits. And if you have a cold front in the winter, meaning it goes down into the teens, it has a way bigger impact than now. In the wintertime, those fish, they'll kind of ease up a little bit in that in those pockets, and they'll feed a little bit, on the bait in there. But if you have a really cold front where it drops, the water temperature down, below the freezing, and your pockets start freezing up, those fish will head out onto the river channel, and they'll get out there in that actual deeper water on the river that is warmer than that, water up near the bank. And relating to Guntersville a little bit more on that question as opposed to Coosa, that puts those fish in a winter pattern. And those winter patterns, like Dan was talking about earlier, that pre-spawn, that's when you can have the big 30-pound bags up there, is when those fish are really grouped up out there deep, because those pockets and shallows got hit by extreme cold water and water temperatures, and it moves them out. But on Neely Henry, Coosa, or Weiss, any of these lakes, what I've seen through my years of fishing is you just have to slow down a little bit. You can't do as much power fishing. but it's not always the case. So, sometimes when you hit the cold front, it really doesn't have as much impact on it. You can still stay with those aggressive, the crankbaits, the spinner baits and whatnot. So it's a little bit of trial and error, but I do try to slow down a little bit when the cold fronts hit.
I'm going to follow up on what you just said. In the Delta, where most of my river type fishing was, which is not really a river per se, but wintertime, a lot of times those fish tend to hibernate in marinas and pockets and stuff like that. Do you find that here?
Yeah.
Because the current is lower and
it's an easy place just to hang out for the winter
just
months
to hide
until that cold snap hits and those backwater pockets get colder faster.
And a lot of times the guys out there, they'll throw a jerkbait an awful lot of the time that time of the year because you got to kind of make them eat something. Yeah. I kind of wonder about that. And that's just me talking, wondering about things out here.
It's the same.
Hey, can I jump in here and just remind everybody, if we've got any new folks that have joined us, comment. Even if you don't have a question, just drop a comment where you're watching from. Love to know that. But out of the comments, and certainly we'd love for you to like and share as well. We'll go through and pick some winners for some producer swim baits. So I'm not sure. We've been going almost an hour, right? So we'll keep going as long as we keep getting questions. But I have a question. Speaking of the swim baits, that I don't think we really talked about earlier. What's your rod, reel, line setup when you're swim bait fishing in Guntersville?
Swim bait at Guntersville, like I said, 6.5 inch swim bait, 3/4 ounce head. So with that setup, I'll use the 20-pound Invisex Cigar fluorocarbon on the line, and on the rod I like a little bit more than a medium heavy, and sometimes I don't like the heavy because it doesn't allow you to have any give to the fish. So I've toyed around a little bit, and Canterbury, he's got some rods that I was toying around with too, that rod that's between the medium heavy and the heavy. So I'm still playing around a little bit, but I like something in that range, and the length on it, at least a 7.6 and up to a 7.10. A lot of long casts.
Are you using Halo rods?
I am using Halo rods, yes.
Okay.
And I like to have a good rod that I can get the penetration on the hook, but also I need to have a little bit of bend to give them that resistance too. So ratio on the reels, I've gone up and up over the past few years. I started out, with the big swim baits out there in 15 foot of water. I would use a 6:1 ratio, just a nice, retrieve there, but it had to, be a little bit faster. So then what I noticed, though, is on the swim baits, they'll knock slack in your line. The same way on the jig, it takes a second to get caught back up. So I bumped up to a 7.3, and I started being able to be a little bit more in tune with when that fish knocked slack in it, I could catch up quick enough and get the hook set. Well, this year I've even gone up to an 8.0, and I know some of the swim bait guys probably wouldn't agree with that, but now I'm able to just crawl my reel, and whenever I get that bite, it's almost just an instant crank, and I've got hook set. And I've also done that on same concept on my swim jigs. When I'm throwing that swim jig in the grass, I heard some of these guys 7.3, 7.1, even some of the best jig fishermen in the world talking about it in the past few weeks. But I've even gone up to the 8 ratio reels on my swim jigs because they knock that slack in there. You can get that hook set really quick. But the bigger thing is if you don't get that hook set real quick, as soon as they hit that fish and that fish hits it in the grass, they get around a clump in that grass. They get into that dead stuff that's prevalent right now this time of year, and it's hard to get them out of. So I like the high speed reel even on my swim jigs.
And what reel brand are you?
I use Lew's for most of my reels. I'm not dialed into just one reel. I've got a Tatula. I've got several Revos, but probably on my go-to rods that has my go-to baits, I'm usually got the Lew's.
All right. Let's see. When fishing the shad spawn, this is Stephen Turner again. When fishing the shad spawn, are spinner baits, chatter baits, or swimming plastics the best? Yes. Right?
Yeah.
No. Go ahead and answer.
Well, right now I've seen a little bit of shad spawn this past week, and first thing I tied on was a spinner bait. I love to throw the spinner bait on those sea walls, where the shad spawn's going on. I saw that some at Weiss this past week. But even on my buzz baits, I'll go with a white buzz bait. which predominantly most of the rest of the year I'll use a black, but during the shad spawn period, I'll use a white buzzbait around those seawalls. And I'll be honest, I don't like to slow down as much with the soft plastics during the shad spawn. Because when that shad spawn's going on, you're usually going to find more aggressive fish that you can cover a lot more water on. So I'll put those top water spooks on, the spinner bait, chatterbait, and I'll try to cover a lot of water, whenever the shad spawn's going on.
I learned something a while back. We don't actually have them in here yet. But one of the guys that's on the Duo Realis team talks about when the fish are schooling, he throws the Duo Realis spin bait 90, and he throws it on 10-pound line on a casting rod. Well, the 80s, it's a slow bait, but he throws the 90 because a lot of times the fish don't want to come all the way up to get a topwater bait when their fish are schooling. But if it's just under, you can just straight reel it through and those little blades turn. I wonder if that would be good in the shad spawn. I guess I maybe need to make a Duo Realis order for you. Anyway, that's one of those things. But shad spawn, it's move as fast as you can, as efficiently as you can, and make hay while you can, right?
That's once that stuff it goes so fast in the mornings. By 8 o'clock or so, it's pretty much done on a sunny day, in my opinion.
And then you kind of can chase it into the shade, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, Lucretia Clark, if I'm saying that right, I hope so. Watching from Guntersville, I've been catching bunches. That came to a halt yesterday. I had a spot I never see anyone fishing, and I was on fire. My excuse for yesterday was high sky. I'm not sure. I'm supposed to fish Neely this weekend. Is there? Stay current. Look at the
changes daily.
Yes,
and more so on the Coosa River chain than Guntersville. The Guntersville water depth doesn't fluctuate the levels that the Coosa River does because of the dams and the operating systems, the way they raise and lower it. So probably weather related if it's at Guntersville. If you were talking about Coosa, Neely Henry, Weiss, any of these Coosa River lakes, it changes daily because that water may fluctuate 4 feet a day in either direction. So especially up the river, up the river it'll fall overnight. But anyway, big impact from the water levels daily.
You did get her name right.
Yeah, no, she said that.
Yeah.
That's good. I like to have people's names.
Bob's
pronounced.
Question. Great show, good information. What is your favorite lake other than Guntersville, and why?
Favorite lake locally, other than Guntersville, would be Weiss Lake, and Bob's brother Bill and I used to fish there a lot many years ago. But Weiss is kind of was growing up my home lake, so it's always been my favorite lake. The biggest tournament I ever won was on Old Hickory Lake in Nashville, so it's got a really special place in my heart. Every year I look at my calendar and my schedule, and I try to see if I can fit a Old Hickory tournament in there, which is always difficult to do, but that's probably my top 3.
All right. Well, guys, if you got any other questions, I think we've covered a lot of good stuff. Trying to check.
What's the one thing you feel as a fisherman that you need to work on right now?
The one thing that I know I need to work on is my finesse fishing, and my fishing buddies, the Mark McKeggs, Tim Hurst, Damian Tyler, David Kent. That's my little fishing group that we text all the time, and they give me a little grief. They know that I can't, slow down and do the finesse fishing. I can catch fish doing it, and I have done it, and I've tried it, but it's definitely the weakest part of my game, and it's more of a mental thing that I just don't want to do it. Most of the tournaments that I fish are one-day tournaments, and I don't have any confidence that I can go out there with a flipping rod and a little bit finesse bait and have enough weight to compete with those guys that are on those bigger bags of fish. But there's many days I go out there and I do my thing with the big baits, the big rods, and the power fishing jigs. And I get my brains beat in by those guys that are really good when it gets tough, like some of the questions were about the cold fronts coming through and tough conditions. I don't have that skill set to really slow down then and just pick and be so deliberate on where my bait goes and the right line size and all that. So that's definitely my biggest weakness. And in that 50 years old, it's not going to get fixed either.
I can fix you. One of the things that I liked to do when things got tough, see, now coming from where I come from, and I make a mistake here a lot, learning Neely, the thing here is when you're kicking up mud with your trolling motor, you still might need to go shallower sometimes, you know. My mind, when things happen like this, my mind goes to behind me. It goes to suspended fish and those kinds of things. It's because that's what I learned my first adjustment was. So I still make a lot of dumb decisions here for this body of water, for where I grew up fishing, for Smith Lake, for Wadowee, for Martin.
Yeah.
Some of that might be more accurate, but for here, I still make those dumb decisions. And yeah, it's hard to fix something that's been ingrained for so long.
That's why I don't think I could be competitive at the next level. I get questions sometimes. Why don't you go ahead and just start trying to do this full time? You know, go fish the opens. And
because you got 3 kids in college.
Well,
that's why.
That's the number one reason. I got kids in college, but in my heart though, I just don't feel like I can compete with those guys. I look at the guys that are super competitive. They don't. I mean, some of them have a thing that they're really good at, but those guys that are at the top of the game, like Joe Lee and Jacob Wheeler and
shoot, dude, if Fudd can do it, you can do it.
Those guys are versatile though. They can go to these lakes and they can do what that lake needs them to do to catch fish. And I don't have that skill set because I've stayed just right here and not branched out of Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Tennessee.
Again, Matt, I know that he knew there was a hole, and I know how much time he spent learning how to do those things in the off seasons. So going north to go smallmouth fishing, he taught himself how to drop shot and do the finesse stuff. Same thing with the Demiki rigs and all those things. I know you could do that.
Yeah, I probably could. I don't know, my heart's in it.
Well, when it's $100,000 payday on the top end, I think you'd find a way to love doing it.
Yeah.
Lucretia Clark again, she says, I love to walk the dog. I crazy walk it. I do patterns, slow, fast, pause. Sometimes I don't pause. Do you have a favorite or most productive way to walk it?
I stay pretty consistent. I'll pause it every now and then, but I don't do anything other than just get a good walk going, and I'll pause it if I feel like I'm in an area where I have a gut feeling a fish might be looking at it. But for the most of the time, I'm on a continuous walk back and forth with it.
I think you're in trouble.
Oh.
Because somebody said, hush, Tracy. You can too. All you need is a week to pre-fish. He said, get a better job and pay for everything so he can go do that. That's what he says.
No, I didn't.
No, he didn't.
So I'll bring up, you're talking about muddy water and getting shallower conveniently. When are we going to get some kayak fishing? Yeah. You got any interest in trying?
I definitely do.
Crazy
my wife, Lisa, she's drugged me all over the place kayaking for the past few years, and actually 20 years probably been kayaking with her. But every time I go there, I see these guys out there actually look like they're really into kayak bass fishing. I would like to do it. I just haven't had the right boat to do it, and I know that Bucks has recently got the right boats in to do it, so I go over there and look at them every day.
We definitely gonna have to get something now. The weather is getting warm.
Kayak fishing turns into swimming for me.
I'm not.
The only one down there that I could do anything with is the Pro Angler,
the blue
360,
sky.
the blue sky. That's the one. I flipped the one that everybody said you can't flip. So,
all right. Well, it sounds like we need to, with the weather warming up, it's a little more enjoyable. But there's good ways to we'll get out there and do some stuff.
I'll do it.
I'm sure Corey Galloway would love, and he was watching earlier. I don't know if he still is. I'm sure he'd love to teach you how to compete in a kayak and come fish against them.
They would kill me. Those guys know what they're doing in that shallow water. I see their pictures where they're floating some of these creeks around here, and bigger than anything we're catching out there on the mainland.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well,
yeah, it's the truth. Yeah, some of those things, like when the PAA came out here and some of those tournaments that have been here, they got creative, didn't they?
Yeah.
And they found stuff. I mean, Mark Menendez told me about him fishing those tournaments, and he was 1 or 2 bites away from winning the 2 PAA tournaments that were here. But yeah, they were using their 10 boats, and their chainsaws were involved in some things, and to get into specific
where
water.
do you store your chainsaw in your FXR? That's
you just take some
You may
rods out.
think I'm joking, but I've had one in there for the past 2 weeks. It's time of year to put brush out.
okay.
And sometimes you just find it on the bank. Let's see.
So do we need to start carrying chainsaws? Is that something we need to add to the loft?
Maybe pole chainsaws.
Yeah.
Tony will make one for us. You know. Mercury Optimax asks, favorite lipless crankbait and technique.
I've kind of been sold on the Excalibur crankbaits. They don't make those anymore. Booyah that we carry here in the shop is the exact same mold, and I hear people debating whether it is or not, and but it's the same mold. And but I used the Excalibur, and that was my favorite. Now Booyah is, and I yo-yo it mostly, and Guntersville is where I probably throw that more so than any other lake, but just staying right above that grass in some kind of yo-yoing pattern is what my best technique is. But the Booyah, which is the new Excalibur, is what I use now.
Lucretia Clark asks, can you send some waypoints for brush piles? He's going to start asking how much you're willing to spend is what he's going to ask.
We'll publish those at bucksisland.com.
Yeah.
For sale? No?
Fads.
Yeah.
Lisa says fads. What is
fish attracting device.
No, fish attracting devices. Okay.
So what you said, yo-yo. What do you mean by that?
Yo-yoing is basically making a good long cast, letting it sink down till it hits the grass, and then just ripping it up out of it, keeping a pretty, not real tight, but enough to where you can see or feel the bite, letting it go back down, ripping it up again, just a slow retrieve of yo-yoing it back to the boat.
Okay. And one of the he likes the Booyah. One of the better ones for the fall is the red-eyed shad from Strike King because it wiggles as it falls. If it's if you need to be slow, the rattle trap itself has a best slow. It moves the most when you have to pull it slow. It pulses at a slow speed where the other ones you kind of have to rip them.
I think those Shaker Z's are pretty good too.
Yeah, those are darn good. The ones that the one that intrigues me is the Heavy Z because it's a 3/4 ounce bait in a 1/2 ounce body.
Yeah.
So the deal with a 3/4 ounce bait, and I use a 3/4 ounce rattle trap and a red-eyed shad a bunch, but I usually use those shallow. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
I throw a big lipless crankbait on 20-pound mono, and I hold the rod tip up and I slow roll that thing shallow because it's heavy for casting, but it's got so much more buoyancy in the body. But the 3/4 ounce weight for when they're deeper in the grass and you want to be able to get the grass better, that Heavy Z is good too.
It is. And I'll also use, when I'm throwing that same pattern with that rattle trap or that, all of them are called rattle trap, I guess, these days. But what I like to do also while I'm yo-yoing is jump back and forth to that Bill Lewis MR6. That MR6 is one of the better crankbaits that I've seen made in a long time. So when I'm fishing that 6 to 8 foot grass, yo-yoing it with the Excalibur, I'll jump over and throw this in the same areas, and sometimes they'll eat this better than yo-yoing the big rattle baits.
MDJ is behind that bait.
Yeah, that's a good one.
This has a honeycomb. I got to see the molds that I cast. Inside of the bait in the molds, it's got a honeycomb pattern in it. So they wanted this to be a true thin wall crankbait for responsiveness, but then you lose durability. There's another crankbait out there that we called it the eggshell, the speed trap from Lure Jensen. And it's traditional. You see a lot of guys, they get the little grass in there and they whack the bait on the water to clear the grass before they make a cast. The speed traps would blow up sometimes. But they wanted a thin wall bait that had the responsiveness, so they built a honeycomb pattern into the mold so that it gives structure ribs inside of that, but doesn't affect the thin wall response of the bait.
So are these the?
Yeah, that's the rattle trap version. Here is what I throw. They make this one. We'll get a little more detail. They make one that's got a little bit more gold in this red here than this one, but this 1/2 ounce is what I found to be the best at Guntersville. It's throwing that 1/2 ounce rattle trap over that grass.
Did I grab the wrong Booyah?
No, that's the right one.
So when do you use the knocker, which Excalibur came up with? When do you use the one knocker versus the regular BB sounds?
I don't know the answer to that, Dano. That's 100% trial and error for me. I see some guys swear by the one knocker or the hard knocker or different, names in the different baits or the traditional BBs. I'll just go out there and just have to experiment each time. And I have seen times where any of those three, whether it's the regular traditional BBs, the hard knocker or the one knocker, I've seen times where they would eat all of them better than the other. So I don't know from the fish's mind what triggers them to eat one over the other, but they all work.
So when you think you're going to be
terrible answer, by the way. For a writer, that was a terrible answer.
Sorry.
Just trust your gut. So if you think they're on a lipless crankbait, and I guess really this question is kind of any technique, but what do you tie on when you're starting out? Do you tie on a few different sizes, a few different colors, a mixture of both as you're trying to do that trial and error and figure that stuff out?
What I'll do, I mean, you've got, I think, mostly half ouncers there. If I'm fishing 4 foot or less, I'll pretty much start out with maybe a 1/4 ounce. And then I'll go to a 1/2 ounce if I can get by with it in that shallower water. If I'm out there in 6 to 8, 10 foot of water, I'll use the 3/4 ounce. The 1 ounce is actually my favorite one to throw, and I don't know many people that even throws the 1 ounce, but I'll use the 1 ounce Excalibur or Booyah, or the 1 ounce rattle trap. I'll use it exclusively for weeks at a time at Guntersville once they get on a winter pattern. But we haven't had a winter pattern for the past couple of 2 years because of the water temperatures and the floods that we've had. There's been no reason for those fish to set up out there and use that 1 ounce. But I dictate, what rods I set up based on the depth I'm fishing.
Gotcha. Okay. And then you just few different colors.
I stick with crawfish color most of the time, and everybody knows at Guntersville the red oranges are traditionally better, so I'll go a little more red and orange in the springtime, and then the summertime chrome and blue to me is the best of all time color ever, so I can use it from January to December and get bit on the chrome and blue.
Okay, and Lucretia asked another question here. Said somebody was making these baits at Guntersville State Park. G-Man was at Guntersville Tackle and asked about the Zorro made a bait called the Gay Blade. So it's like the silver buddies and that kind of deal. Do you ever fish those?
I don't fish the silver buddies.
Because they require a spinning rod to use.
That's not a bait that I throw, but I'm sure it's a fish catching machine. But I don't throw the blade baits.
Lucretia, that particular category of lure is more of a finesse type of a presentation. You tend to throw that on spinning gear. It's more of a wintertime type of cold water deal, and you throw it on a spinning rod, and you kind of use it as more of a jigging type deal, where you let it hit the bottom. And what he was talking about, yo-yoing with a lipless crankbait, but if it's real cold and the water tends to be a little, cooler and the fish are deep, that's what those are for. The Gay Blades and those kinds of things. Shane Robinson, that's one of your brothers.
Yes, sir.
He wants you to put together a pack of baits for purchase that we're discussing.
All right.
They're all going to be the opposite colors of what you really throw, though, right?
Conveniently, we actually need to do this with you. No kidding. That's just throwing it out as a recommendation. But we've got these that we've done with Mark Menendez and Chris Zaldane. We've got one from Matt and Scott Canterbury, which I don't see the kits right now. I know we've sold a few of them in the last few weeks. But I don't know. Would you be game to help us put a little local knowledge pack together? Might be
definitely will.
Definitely makes my life easy on setting up the website for people to just get a packet. And I've been kind of a proponent for doing that because
he's
I'm
bought
new.
Most of them.
Yeah, everyone we put together. But I mean, seriously, I'm new. I'm learning, and I hear there's a billion different opinions on the different, it makes it nice and easy to just click, and I want to get all that stuff and get out and try and use it.
I can definitely do it. It'll be a completely separate type bait when you're comparing the Coosa Rivers to Guntersville, though.
Right.
So we can either do one or the same. But anyway,
I don't know what would you guys be interested in if there are any folks. I'm sure Sergeant Hurd would be up here
in 13 seconds.
He'd be happy to. He was excited that we were talking about some new tackle coming in yesterday when we were out on a pontoon. So.
Carrie Shoemate says,
Virginia,
how much money do I need to send you for you to send me your 10 favorite baits? As much money as he wins. I don't know if there's enough money, Carrie.
I'll take care of you, Carrie. I'll get you some baits headed that way. He's in Virginia.
That's cool. Let's see. we've got those kits on our website, guys. Shotbucks Island. It looks like right now we've just got the Zaldane kit, which is largely around swim baits. We've got a Menendez kit, which is a topwater. I mean, it's a pro river kit, and it's got a little bit of everything. It's got some crankbaits in it. It's crankbaits and some flipping jigs. That's a river kit. And the Zaldane bait is a swim bait kit, largely.
A bunch of Megabass stuff.
It's got the mag drafts in there. It's got some spark shads and stuff like that. That's our most expensive one because those baits are more expensive. Steve West, what's the best time for a jigging spoon? Depends on which kind. If it's cold, you're going to do vertical jigging, and that's when you're going to want to throw those 3/4 and 1 ounce vertical jigging spoons. The ledge time when you start throwing those flutter spoons, like the Lake Fork Big Dandy spoons we've got here from Talon, that's more of a post spawn into summer when they do that kind of jigging spoon. But if it's the vertical jigging, it's going to be anytime they're offshore and you can get over the top of them, would be that one. Let's see. So Shane Robinson wants a Weiss, Neely, and Guntersville package.
Do that.
I could use those 3.
You'd need one for winter, spring, summer, fall.
We could get Logan Martin in that too, but I'll have to call Mark McKegg. He's probably the best I know at Logan Martin. So
Mark's not going to share anything. He'll ask you.
He's amazing. Yeah, he's a good one.
Let's see. Logan Steele, he answered this question earlier. How many spinning reels do you own that aren't crappie reels? Not many. He doesn't like them because he doesn't know how to use them. He hurts his knuckles on the little zero. He doesn't have any in the boat, in other words. He's afraid. He's afraid to get in touch with his feminine side.
I'm afraid to grow my skills.
All right. Well, Michael, I guess let's
yeah, I think we've been going
more than an hour.
Yeah, more than an hour. Guys, I'm sorry that the weather did what it did. I know I guess I'm really not all that sorry that we're not out getting completely drenched. As much fun as that would have been. But I'm glad that everybody got to hang out with us some. We're still, I think, trying to figure out the future of doing these videos.
We will do more. I might even do one or here. Maybe I'll do a finesse one since that seems to be one that most of our people don't like to do.
But I know we're talking about we're trying to do Weiss, trying to put Guntersville somewhere in there. Might be kind of fun. So I don't know if you guys would want to watch anybody learn anything more about Guntersville actually on the water.
He brought that up. I was a little surprised. He brought that up. I mean, fishermen don't like to give secrets, but Tracy is more than willing to share and teach, and it's been awesome.
But I will make I'll as we've been saying, number one, I'm still getting questions. The loft is open. You can come in here and shop tackle.
Boats are here.
Boats are here. We're getting more. Factories are starting to open back up. I think we're going to get a few more skeeters here before too long. We just got a couple of beautiful falcons in, a blue and silver F205,
and then a little sister of
a little mini Belat F195. It's not all that mini with that 200 Merc on the back of it, but so we're here. Appointments, if you guys are shopping for boats, appointments seem to be working really, really well. But we're certainly, if you walk in, we're not turning you away by any stretch. We're just trying to manage how many folks are in here all at one time. But the tackle store is open. You can walk in here. We've also got it online. If you don't want to walk in here, either because you don't want to be near us, which I understand, or you just want to stay away, we can meet you at the gate with.
It's
with the
it's
pack.
not Sunday, so we haven't showered yet. So anyway,
But so you guys getting back to work at Honda?
Yeah, we're starting back production next Monday, so they're ready to get out of this abnormal period.
And what do you work on down there?
I work in quality at Honda.
Okay.
I'm responsible for some level of vehicle quality.
Okay. All right. Well, you seem to be doing a pretty good job. Huh?
It's a very good vehicle. It's easy to do with the Honda.
All right. I think I would one day. I'd love to sit down and talk trucks. I know you're big fan of the Ridgeline.
Yeah.
And I think that'd be a fun conversation to have someday. So, everybody's got to have something to tow the boat with.
Yeah. I love the Ridgeline.
all right. Well, guys, from all of us here, it still amazes me how much you guys engage, and it's an honor to be able to be a part of bringing this stuff to you. We've got great people that have joined our team. It's humbling. It truly is. And it's even more humbling to have people like you guys spend time asking questions and engaging with us. So very much so. Thank you for spending time with us. It really means a bunch.
Thank you.
All right. We will see you guys later. Are we going to do a recap later? I think this is good. So we're going to pick some winners, and we'll announce that later on this afternoon. So we'll see you guys.